Welcome to Love and Limits, using the power of emotion coaching to support your child's recovery, presented by Bryn Miller. My name is Danny Gillity, the Executive Director at the Eating Disorder Foundation, and I'm delighted to welcome everyone here tonight. Today's workshop is brought to you in collaboration with the Eating Disorder Foundation and Bryn Miller Therapy Services. The Eating Disorder Foundation was founded in 2003 with a mission to be an effective resource in the prevention and elimination of eating disorders through free and accessible education, support, and advocacy. We are a Denver-based organization that is now serving individuals and families both nationally and internationally. You can find more information about EDF and Bryn Miller's practice in the links I will provide in the chat. If you have questions for our presenter, I invite you to use the chat feature to communicate with me directly throughout the workshop. The chat is kept confidential and will come to me directly. We will save time for Q&A after the presentation, and I will deliver those questions to Bryn. We will not be sharing the PowerPoint. However, we are recording tonight and will send the recording as soon as possible. And now I'd like to introduce our presenter. Bryn Miller is a licensed professional counselor, certified eating disorder specialist supervisor, and a certified therapist in emotion-focused family therapy. With an expertise in family-based treatment, Bryn is passionate about helping parents and caregivers and their children in a way that brings compassion and healing to the entire family. During her time as a clinical manager at Eating Recovery Center's Child and Adolescent Program, Bryn developed the curriculum for and ran parent groups in the family-based residence program and trained and supervised therapists in FBT and EFFT. Bryn is the owner of Bryn Miller Therapy Services, an outpatient practice based in Denver that, in addition to weekly sessions, provides support to parents and caregivers across the country through virtual skills groups and workshops. When not working, Bryn likes to read, meditate, ski, and try, although unsuccessfully, to keep up with her two young children. Welcome, Bryn.
Awesome. Thank you, Danny. We ready to go ahead and get started?
Sounds great.
All right, perfect. Thank you. So the name of the talk today, Love and Limits, using the power of emotion coaching to support your child's recovery. And we'll get into what all of that means in a second here. So want to start by saying just welcome. My slide should be, oh, there we go. Got a little delay here. All right, so welcome. First thing I want to say is thank you. It's an absolute honor to be here. So as a parent myself, I know that letting anyone into the world of your parenting is an incredibly vulnerable endeavor. And it's an honor and a privilege that I do not take lightly. So first of all, I want to say thank you for being here and thank you for allowing me to be here with you. Just a note on terminology, I will use the term child to describe a child or a loved one of any age. These skills and this particular skill that we'll be talking about today is designed to work between parents and caregivers and children across the lifespan. So whether your child is 8 years old or 68 years old, these skills will be applicable. You'll shift them a little bit, of course, depending. But when I say child, just want you to know that it means your child, not a child. And then also that we'll be using the terms caregiver and parent interchangeably. Okay, I think I got my buttons going here. All right. So this talk's designed to be interactive. And so as I would love to have you and I I'd like to invite you to walk through the steps as we go. So if you don't have a pen and paper with you, take a quick second, go grab a pen and a paper. And as we walk through, I'll have a little prompt right in green, so it's really clear. Write this down, okay? And so take a second, run and grab it if you need to. The more that you treat this as an interactive experience, the more you'll get out of it. That being said, you do you. Take care of yourself, honor where you are today. I want to make space for the fact that as parents and caregivers, sometimes maybe the thing you need most is to sit here in front of the screen and zone out for an hour. That's okay. We've all been there. I get it. And so if it's helpful to be super engaged in writing everything down, great. And if that's just not where you are today, I want you to take care of yourself and honor that for yourself. Also, take what's useful, ignore what's not. So I'm going to be presenting something that has been useful to a lot of parents and caregivers, to a lot of families that I've worked with. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be a perfect fit for you and your family. So take what's helpful, take what fits for you, make it your own. And if it feels like, oh, that doesn't really feel like that would work for my kid, leave it. You are the expert on you and your loved one. All right. If you're here tonight with us, I can imagine that it has been hard. I'd be willing to bet that your desire to help your child has led to conflict at times in the past, or maybe even today. I can also guess that you felt like you didn't know what to do at various points, and maybe even that you've worried that you're doing something wrong. Maybe even your child has told you you're doing this wrong, which can make us terrified about jumping in or being there to support our loved ones. And perhaps you felt at various moments like you've had to stand by and watch your child struggle. And as a parent, that can be one of the most devastating and most challenging pieces, feeling like you can't do anything to help. So I want you to see, just based on the fact of the number of how many people that we have that have shown up here tonight, you are not alone in these struggles. Just being here tonight is a testament to your love for your child and your desire to help them. So tonight we'll work on one skill that hopefully we can leave by the end of the night with. So take a deep breath. We're going to dive right in. So I'm going to ask you guys to take deep breaths. I'm going to ask you to maybe even act things out and write things down. So like I said, your comfort level, but bear with me. So I want you to first think of something your child does that concerns you. So this could be a behavior that has to do with their eating disorder. This could be how they manage their emotions. This could be how they interact with people in their lives. Any kind of behavior, anything your child does that concerns you. Now, when this behavior comes up, when your child engages in this behavior, what does your child say about this? And I want us to put it into words of, I don't want to fill in the blank. And so, for example, this could be, I don't want to eat. I don't want to go to treatment. I don't want to see my therapist. I don't want to talk to you about this. I don't want to get better from my eating disorder. Anything that correlates with the behavior that's the most concerning for you, for your child, or one of the behaviors that you maybe have the hardest time talking about or sort of addressing. And I want you to take on your piece of paper that you have, I want you at the top of the page to write this down in quotations, just like this. I don't want to, and then fill it in the blank with whatever it is that your child would say about this particular thing. I'll give everybody a minute. And when your child says this to you, I don't want to, whatever it is. I want you to name one feeling that you experience when you hear your child say this. And if you're having trouble identifying a feeling, it could be notice in your body where you feel some kind of tension or stuckness. It could be a thought like, ugh, not this again, something like that. But if you can come up with a feeling word, great. And I want us to walk through the sentence. It makes sense. I feel angry, sad, scared, hopeless, ashamed, overwhelmed, frustrated, any of these and more, because, and I want you to write this down on your paper as well too. Just write out, it makes sense that I feel whatever that feeling is, because, and I want you to just write down one reason why it would make sense that you might feel that way. Now, let's say your child engages in some behavior and it's embarrassing, and then you sort of feel bad about yourself that you feel embarrassed, right? That's okay. I want us to just stick with, hey, it makes sense that I might feel embarrassed, for example, when my 5-year-old throws a temper tantrum at Target and everyone's looking at me and I'm worried they're judging me, right? That's never happened to me personally, of course, but so just write out that sentence for yourself. It makes sense that I feel whatever it is, because. And if you're having a hard time doing this for yourself, imagine that a friend were to say to you, explain this situation. See if it's easier then to say, it makes sense, of course, that you would have felt that way, because, and see if you can extend yourself that same compassion. Okay, we're going to do an exercise. Take a breath. Now I want you to be your child. So we're going back to high school acting class here, if you can do that journey with me. And I want you to imagine that we're talking about this thing that your child says, I don't want to. So let's just say, for example, that it's, I don't want to see my therapist. I don't want to go to therapy, right? And I want you to, as you're imagining that you are your child, I really want you to feel that no in your body, to really get that sense that your child has and feel it in your actual body of, no, I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to respond to you with in two different ways. And I want you to just take note of how these things feel. Okay. So it's going to sound weird, but I'm going to say 1, 2, 3. And I want you to actually say to the camera, say to me through the computer, I don't want to, just the way that your child would say it. Okay. So 1, 2, 3. I don't want to. You have to. We already talked about this and you agreed. You said when we talked about it that you would do this. And you know it's what's best for your treatment. Your whole team is saying it. Your doctor's saying it. We talked about this already. Don't you want to recover? So that's response 1. And I want you to take note as your child, how did it feel? Particularly from the neck down, and just jot down a word or two of how did it feel? What did you want to say back to me when this is how I responded? And we're going to do it again. So shake it out. Take another deep breath. And I'm going to ask you to be your child again. And this is a great exercise in and of itself of just connecting with the empathy of being able to put yourself in your child's shoes. So be your child. Feel the no in their body, in your body again, right? And I'm going to give you another 1, 2, 3. And I really want you to, let me have it. I don't want to. Okay. So 1, 2, 3. I get it. It makes sense that you don't want to. It's so annoying for you to have to deal with all of this all the time, nonstop. Plus, you're doing this day in and day out, and you're exhausted. I can also imagine that you wish it could be a little bit easier. It's just so hard sometimes. That makes so much sense. I love you, and I want you to know I'm not going anywhere. we can take this all one day at a time. Okay. So that's the second response. And just take note again, how did it feel? Especially from the neck down, if you check in with your body and write that down, a couple of words that come to mind. So if we were all in the same room doing this together, I would have you just shout these things out. And I'm sure I would hear a bunch of different things from everyone. In the many times that I've done this with parents and caregivers, the biggest differences that I hear is that in response one, you feel like you're digging your heels in. When you say, I don't want to, and I say, you have to, that immediately you're kind of preparing for a fight, and it gets us into this place of conflict right away. You have to, I don't want to, you have to, I don't want to, right? And then with the second one, it doesn't necessarily mean that immediately you're like, oh, okay, now I want to do that thing that I didn't want to do. Yay, this is going to be so fun, right? But what often I hear from parents and caregivers is a feeling, especially in their body from the neck down, of softening, that it's harder to maintain this really defiant stance when a caregiver comes to them with that kind of approach. There's an increase in flexibility. There's often a feeling of, okay, I still don't want to do that thing, but at least I feel like they get it or they understand on some level. And so what are the differences? So response one is convincing. I'm trying to convince you. I'm trying to give you reasons why you have to do it, or why it's important to do it, right? And then the second response is emotion coaching. And so why we're here tonight, what is emotion coaching and why do we do it? So we're going to start with why we do emotion coaching. So one of the first reasons that we do emotion coaching is that your child may feel seen and heard, and therefore be more likely to come to you for support. In years and years and years of doing this work, I've heard it 1,000 times when individuals will say, God, I wish, my mom, my dad, my grandparent, my husband, my wife, whatever it is, I wish they would just listen. And I wish they wouldn't try and fix it, but I could just feel like they see me, they hear me, they get it, right? And that increases the likelihood that they come to you for support. It also may help you as the parent and caregiver feel less anxious because you have a plan of what to do or say, rather than your child saying, I don't want to go to therapy. And you're like, oh, great. Here we are having the same fight again that always gets us in circles and I have no idea what to do. Now, after tonight, you're going to have the thought, oh my gosh, here's an opportunity to do that emotion coaching thing that Bryn taught me, right? How exciting. Yay. Okay, maybe not at that extreme, but hopefully it will give you a sense of, I've got some kind of roadmap. I've got some kind of idea of what I could do next. Your child may feel like you get it and feel less alone and less crazy. And I say the crazy in quotations, really important when we talk about eating disorders, because if you can put yourself in your child's shoes, and maybe you've had your own personal experience with this, but when you're struggling with an eating disorder, oftentimes all these people in your life are telling you that your eating disorder is bad and it's hurting you, and we've got to work on your eating disorder and we've got to get rid of your eating disorder. But there may be a tiny part of you, or maybe a big part of you, that feels like your eating disorder is helping you in some way. And so I've had so many individuals tell me, God, I feel crazy, or I feel alone because nobody gets it. And so this is so important and can be so powerful, especially when your child's struggling with something like an eating disorder. Your child may also be more open to your limit setting or your problem solving. If you've ever felt like your child is struggling with something and you're like, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And they're just shooting things down left and right, even if they're really good ideas. Emotion coaching can be really helpful because we increase the flexibility, we increase the openness to some of our limit setting, some of our problem solving. So the way I like to think about this one is, if you imagine that you made a big pan of lasagna and maybe you burned it, right? And it's really, really stuck on the pan. You could run it under water and start with the sponge and the scrub brush and put a lot of elbow grease into it. Or you could run really hot water and let it pool in the pan and have it soften. And then you still probably have to go in with the scrub brush, right? Especially for things that are super stuck on. But the hot water is going to loosen things up a little bit so that when you bring the brush in, it's more responsive. Another way to think about that, if that's helpful. Your child may also more easily de-escalate when they're emotionally activated when we use emotion coaching. So if you can imagine that your child is at a 9 or a 10 out of 10 when some particular thing comes up, some particular conversation comes up, are we going to get them to a 1? Probably not. But if we can get them from a 9 to a 7, they might have more access to some of their coping skills. They might better be able to access the things that will help get them from a 7 to a 3. If we can just help them inch down that ladder a little bit. Now, these are all things that can happen in the moment when we do emotion coaching, but there's also things that we see that happen long-term with emotion coaching when we continue to use this skill over and over again. And these are really cool. So one of the things is that your child will learn that feelings don't need fixing, that what they need is to be felt. And this has huge implications when we talk about mental health issues, because so often mental health issues are related to the feeling that the feelings are overwhelming. I can't handle this feeling, so I need to use a behavior. I need to use an eating disorder behavior. I need to rely on a substance to help me manage these feelings that feel so overwhelming. And because emotion coaching is going to have you go towards these big, scary emotions, your child learns, oh, I can tolerate this. I don't need to avoid it or to push it away. I can actually feel it. And it increases their sense of self-efficacy with emotions. Another way that this can be really valuable is that your child learns that they can handle their big, scary feelings without those symptoms we were just talking about because of your modeling. So the way that I like to think about this one is, like I said, I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and we're big into monsters in my house right now. We're talking a lot about monsters. And so if my kids were to run into my room at night and say, Mom, there's a monster under the bed, come look, come help us. And if I were to say, I'm not going to go in there. I don't, what if the monster gets me? I can't handle that. Let's all stay in my room, right? Do you think I'd ever get them back in their own beds, back in their own rooms? No way, right? And so when they come in and they say, there's a monster under the bed, it's big, it's scary, I can't deal with it, I don't know what to do, that we can say, we got this. Is it a green monster or a purple monster? Oh, monsters love orange juice. Let's go get some orange juice and bring it for the monsters, right? Obviously a very different scenario with your child who's an adult or, young adult. But our kids are watching us. And when we demonstrate that we're not scared of their big feelings, their anger, their hopelessness, their shame, that we can sit with those feelings with them, it can have a huge impact on their ability to access their own confidence around those same feelings. And lastly, your child will internalize this script and be able to access it at some point down the road without your help. So when you do emotion coaching with your child, you are helping them co-regulate. You're helping them access these really important emotion regulation skills, and you're sort of scaffolding it for them. And a lot of parents will say, well, gosh, doesn't that mean my child is going to need me all the time? Am I coddling them? Are they going to become dependent on me to do this? But it's much like when our kids are little and they're learning how to walk. So they pull up on our pant leg, or they ask you to bend over with your fingers so they can hold on. We don't worry that they're going to be dependent on us forever to do that, to walk. We know that they need us to help them balance in the beginning so that they can do it on their own. And so when we do this, not only does it not increase dependence on us, if they can internalize this and carry this with them, it will only bolster those emotion regulation skills that will help their own process during recovery. And these are all key skills. These last 3 in particular are all key emotion regulation skills that if I were, for example, working in therapy with your child individually, these would be top on my list in terms of the goals that I would have for working with your child individually. And so the emotion coaching framework allows you to help your child get these skills without them even having to do it in therapy. And so, especially if your child says something like, I don't want to go to therapy or I don't want to go to treatment, just using these skills are ways to help them develop some of these skills without them having to do it necessarily. And then on top of all that, and the reason why you are all here tonight and why we are so passionate, those of us that do this work, to get this into the hands of parents and caregivers, is because on top of all of these reasons I just gave you, due to the bonding that happens during the attachment process, when you, the parent or caregiver, emotion coaches your child, it creates a flood of oxytocin in their brain, which creates calming in the limbic system. So when a loved one emotion coaches, even if you do it even imperfectly, even if you call me the next day and you say, Bryn, it was awful, it was a mess, it was terrible, it is still supercharged because your child is neurobiologically wired to respond to you in this way. I know it doesn't always feel that way, which I get and I understand, but I'll tell you that even me emotion coaching your child on my best day as a therapist, it's not going to have the same impact because your child is not wired to me in the same way. And so this is one of the reasons why I want to get these tools to parents and caregivers, because if you can do this at home, it's even more potent, it's even more powerful. So hopefully I've sold you on it now and you're like, all right, just teach me how to do it. So what is emotion coaching? By the way, we call these advanced caregiver skills because they can feel a little daunting at first, just like learning a new language. It takes a minute, it can feel clunky for a second, which is why we practice them. But also because it's not that not doing these things is what got us into this place. Not emotion coaching is not what causes mental health issues. Parents and caregivers don't cause eating disorders, right? But using these skills can help us get our child out of these things. It can help us find a way to the next step of this. And it's skills that you probably didn't need until your child was struggling with a mental health issue. So it's like going back and getting a PhD. That's what we're doing tonight. So emotion coaching is a 3-step process. Step 1, validation. Step 2, emotional support. Step 3, practical support. And practical support is only if needed. And we'll talk about that when we get to that. So what does emotion coaching sound like? So I'm going to ask you guys to close your eyes, if you'll go with me on this. And I'm just going to have you, again, pay attention to how this feels in your body, okay? If you're here, I can imagine that it's been hard. I bet your desire to help your child has led to conflict in the past. You may have felt like you didn't know what to do, or even at times that you were making it worse. Perhaps you felt like you had to stand by while you watched your child struggle, which can be absolutely devastating. As you can see, you're not alone in your struggles. Just being here tonight is an indication that you love your child and that you want to help them. We're going to learn one skill tonight you can use right away to support your child. So if that sounds familiar, it's because all of that is what I said in the second slide to welcome you guys here. So you've already been emotion coached. So how does it feel? And I want you to notice that even if I missed the mark, so obviously I had to write this slide without knowing the particulars of every situation of everyone that's here, right? I couldn't possibly speak to all the nuances and the details of each of the journeys that you've been on. But I'm going to take a guess based on what I know about eating disorders, what I know about working with parents and caregivers. And I'm going to see what lands, right? And so there might be things that I said in this that don't exactly map on to your experience. And I want you to notice, did you still feel my care and my concern, even if it wasn't exactly spot on? And this is important to mention because one of the biggest questions that I get from parents and caregivers is, what if I emotion coach the wrong thing? You know, what if I say, oh, you don't want to go to therapy because you hate your therapist? And they're like, I don't hate my therapist. And I was wrong. Isn't that going to be bad? Right. And it's scary. It's one of the things that I think is one of the biggest barriers to using this skill for parents. But I want you to notice that it's very possible that you felt the concern, you felt my desire to understand you, even if what I'm doing is taking guesses that aren't exactly spot on. And that's one of the things that can be really powerful with this. So I'm sure it'll come up in the Q&A as we'll talk about that. Sometimes emotion coaching also sounds like this. That sucks. I'm here. And that's it. Especially if your child is really angry. If you have a kid that's quick to shut you down when you try and do this, sometimes this is it. Sometimes this is emotion coaching, and that's okay. That's great too. That sucks. It's hard. I'm here. And then that's it. So let's go back to your statement that your child made. I don't want to. And before we get into how do we walk through the emotion coaching steps, I want to go through and acknowledge what our knee-jerk reactions are to this, right? So your kid says, I don't want to. And I want you to write down, what is the first thing that flies out of your mouth? Just like, don't even think about it. You haven't been paying attention to the last, 25 minutes, just the first thing that comes out of your mouth. And I want you to write it down. And I'll give you some ideas. You have to. That's my first one. Immediately. No, you have to. Done. Next question, right? Like, I have 2 kids. I do this. I struggle with this stuff myself, even though I teach it. So please know you are not alone in that. Here's another alternative that I'm very good at. Okay, you don't have to. Like, I don't want to have the fight. It's fine. Okay, you don't have to, right? We talked about this last week. You promised that you would. Like, come on, are we really talking about this again? Or don't you remember the studies? Remember what your doctor said at your appointment last week, or what your therapist, or remember what your dietitian said? Here, did you see that article in the Wall Street Journal? Did you see that data that they cited in the New York Times? Let me show it to you, right? We want to use logic. We want to use reasoning. Fine. And then we walk away. We don't talk about it again. Or maybe it won't be that bad. You'll be fine. Or like, remember the last time that you went to therapy and you actually said you liked it afterwards? Remember that? Maybe it'll be good. Maybe you'll enjoy it. Or you've got this. Like, I know you can do it. I believe in you. You can totally do this. That kind of cheerleader thing. Maybe we might get really frustrated. I'm subject to this one as well. So just, this is so frustrating. Just do it. And then we storm off angry. Not our best moments as parents, but we've all been there. You think this is hard? It could be so much worse. Do you know how many other things you could be struggling with? Do you know how lucky you are in the big scheme of things in the world? Do you even want to get better? And this last one is tricky. I know it's hard, but, and then we fill in one of the other things. And this one's tricky because it's in the ballpark, but that but can be really, really sneaky and throw you off. And we'll talk about why. So these responses are conditioned. I can write these down without even talking to you guys and know that I'm probably pretty close on at least 1 or 2 of them, because we are socially conditioned to respond in this way. It also comes from a place of love. Even if some of these you sort of cringed at because it felt really critical, even that comes from a place of love. We want our kids to get better. We want them to do what they need to do to recover and to continue their recovery process. We are desperate. And sometimes that doesn't look pretty. We also might be burned out and exhausted and tired ourselves, or not taking care of ourselves, and our fuse is short. So there's a million reasons why we can end up with these responses, even if it doesn't feel like, our best day, right? It's conditioned. It comes from a place of love. And if you put yourself in your child's shoes, how might your knee-jerk response make your child feel? And I want you to take a second to think about that and write that down. And if you're noticing a bunch of shame or self-blame getting kicked up, try to come to yourself with compassion. Like I said, I teach this stuff. I've said almost everything on this page already to my 2-year-old. So you're in good company. But it's worth thinking, these responses that are supposed to come from a good place, how are they actually landing? And are they doing what I want them to do? So emotion coaching. This is our alternative, right? So I want you to imagine that when your child is in distress, when you hear your child saying, I don't want to, whatever it is, I want you to imagine that they are at the bottom of a very long staircase on the floor in a basement with their head on the concrete in the basement. And it's cold and there's spiders and it's yucky and they're curled up in the fetal position and they can't get up. This is where your child is in moments of struggle, in moments of distress. They're on the floor in the basement, all alone. And with the best of intentions, what we tend to do as parents is yell at them from the top of the stairs. Come on, you can do it. Get up. I know you can do it. Why are you in the basement? You don't want to be in the basement. It's so much better upstairs, right? But the problem is that we're yelling from the top of the stairs and they're way down here. They can't hear us. And even if they could, we feel so far away. And so emotion coaching is our way to walk down the stairs with validation and then lay next to them on the floor in the basement with our head on the floor and hold their hand and look in their eyes and say, you're not alone. And that's step 2, which is emotional support. And then step 3, practical support, is give me your hand. And we're going to stand up and together we're going to walk up these stairs one at a time. So walking down the stairs, validation, laying next to them, holding their hand, letting them know they're not alone, emotional support, and then step by step, walking up together, practical support. So this talk is called Love and Limits. The love is I will get down in the basement with you. The love is I don't care how many spiders there are or how cold and dirty and dusty it is. I'm going to get down here with you because you're not alone and I'm not going to let you be alone in these big feelings. The limit part is I'm not going to leave you down here. We are not going to leave everybody in the basement because we don't want to be in the basement. The basement sucks. So let's get out of the basement, but let's do it with you hand in hand with your child. So let's write a script. So this is our emotion coaching script. Step 1, validation. And this is a tricky one because we all have different ideas of what validation means. So let's start with what validation is not, because sometimes we get confused with these. Validation is not pity. Like, oh, that's so hard for you. That's tough, right? No, that's not validation. It's also not judgment. Why are you in the basement? Get out of the basement. Don't be in the basement, right? It's also not looking on the bright side. And we get really tripped up into this. Like, at least it's not this, or at least it's not that, or it could be so much worse, right? That actually can be incredibly invalidating, even though it comes from a really good, in a well-intended place. It's also not using logic or reasoning. This is not, well, this doesn't make sense. Why would you do this? Just do it this way that makes sense, right? Also invalidating because we're not talking about the feelings. We're not saying, oh, yeah, it might be irrational and illogical to feel this way, but I get it. I can put myself in your shoes. It is also not agreement. And this is really important because sometimes parents will say, well, you want me to tell my kid they don't have to go to therapy? I'm like, no. They still have to go to therapy. It's just a question of we can validate why they don't want to go to therapy. Like, I get it. I get why you might not want to go to therapy. I'm a therapist and I could think of 100 reasons why I'd want to skip therapy, right? It doesn't mean we say, okay, you don't have to go. It's also not focusing on yourself. And this can be a tricky one. Parents will often say, well, if I've been through something like this, should I share that? And I think there's a time and a place for that. I think it can be really, really helpful. But what I would say is I'd encourage you to connect to the feelings of your experience without necessarily relating it back to your experience, in part because it's really easy for our children to say, you don't get it, mom. You don't get it, dad. You know, you're 1,000 years old. You don't know what it was like when these days, things like that. It's easy sometimes for them to dismiss your lived experience, even though it's incredibly valuable. So let it inform how you validate without maybe going to that right away. It's not fixing it. It's not fighting with them, and it's not feeling it for them. So what is it? I see you, I hear you, and I get why you feel that way. I can understand this from your perspective, from where you sit, from your point of view. I can connect to that feeling in me that you're feeling. So even if you've never been through something like what your child's struggling with, can you connect to the feelings that are underneath that, the feelings that underpin that are universal, that we've all felt in different situations? Validation is the verbal expression of empathy. It is feeling it with, feeling whatever your child is feeling and feeling it with them without it taking you over. We still need you to be the anchor. We still need you to be the calm in the storm, if you will. It's feeling it with them, alongside of them, so that they're not alone in it. So what does this sound like? And what do we actually write in your script? Your child says, I don't want to, X, Y, and Z. You say, it makes sense that you don't want to. And then you're going to say, because. And we're going to do 3 of these. And I know it sounds like a lot and it will feel like a lot at the beginning. And that's okay. Like anything, as we do it more and more, it will get easier and easier. But take a stab at it. And I'll give you guys a couple minutes here. And if you only get one, put a little star next to it and then come back to it afterwards. But see if you can connect to 3 reasons why your child might not want to do that thing that they don't want to do. So I'll walk through some examples as you're writing, if that's helpful. If it's not helpful, you can mute me or ignore me. If you want to just do your thing, just zone me out. But if we were to take the example, I don't want to go to therapy. I mean, geez. I can think of 1,000, right? So it's going to be different for your child. Every child is going to be different. Every person is going to be different. But there's some guesses I could make. You don't want to go to therapy because it takes an hour out of your week and you're already really busy and you have a lot going on and you're stressed and you're juggling a million things. And it feels like it's out of the way and it's inconvenient. You don't have to have that many words. It could just be because it's inconvenient or because you have a million other things going on, right? A second because could be, I know you guys talked about some hard stuff in session last week, and maybe you're feeling a little apprehensive about going back and, digging in with some of those things. And a third possibility could be because you're exhausted and going to therapy forces you to talk about things that are hard and it's draining. And it takes a lot of energy that this week you just feel like you don't really have. So you're not agreeing with your child and saying, yeah, therapy sucks, you never have to go. You're just saying, I get it. I get why you might not want to be doing that. So we'll keep moving on. If you don't have the 3 becauses, that makes perfect sense. It's totally fine. Put a star next to it and go back. And if you find yourself getting stuck on not really knowing what the becauses might be or what they could be, because at the end of the day, we're all just guessing, right? And that's okay. At the end of the day, see if you can take a few deep breaths and connect in your body. Sometimes we get in our head with this and it feels like a sort of cognitive exercise. See if you can take a few deep breaths, just like you did at the beginning when you said, I don't want to, and see if you can feel it in your body, because that might help. It might help to connect in that way. You could even put your hands on your heart. I know that sounds so cheesy. It can be really helpful of just trying to imagine what this might be like for your child. So put a little star if you're not there yet. We're writing all of this down. And the caregiver translation on this, which is, I've stolen these from caregivers over the years because they have a better way of explaining it than I ever could. I had a dad that I was doing this with one time, and he goes, "Oh, it's not the truth about what happened. It's their truth." And I was like, yes, that's it. And so when we validate, it's not about the truth. It's not about, whether or not therapy is good or bad or right or wrong. It's that I can get it from where you sit. It's your truth in this moment through the lens that you have on, right? So step 2, emotional support. And emotional support is 1 or 2 sentences that conveys comfort, connection, feeling heard, provides some kind of reassurance. There can be communication of unconditional positive regard or no judgment, which is just a fancy way of saying, I love you. And, I would never judge you for this, or I am not going anywhere. Communication of togetherness, we're in this together. If your child is open to it, this could be physical affection. Some kids are super open to that. Other kids are going to push you away, especially if we're catching them in a moment of anger. It's going to be really hard to go in with, a hug. But it might be effective for your kid. Giving them some space after all of this can be helpful. And, this could be, I won't ask you about it again. Just want you to know I'm here and I love you, right? That would be giving them some space. When we give space, we want to ensure that we're saying, hey, I'll come back afterwards. So my caregiver translation on this one is, it's like a verbal hug. And so this is just, it makes sense you feel this way. I love you. I'm not going anywhere. I know you're doing the best that you can. I know this is hard. Some kind of comfort, connection, reassurance. Sometimes we overthink this one. A lot of times, this is going to be the first thing that you want to have fly out of your mouth. Okay, last step, practical support. And I write here, if needed, because a lot of times, depending on the situation, if we validate and provide emotional support, we don't need to do any practical support. If you're a fixer, if you're like a parent and you're like, identify as like, oh, I want to fix it, this is going to be the first thing you want to do. You want to jump to practical support, which is like, okay, what are your coping skills? Okay, did you make a pros and cons list? All right, did you call your support team? We want to go right to practical support if we're a fixer. And a lot of times it's not even necessary. So practical support will be needed if there's something that's a health and safety concern. And so if your child is struggling with, eating disorder behaviors that might be dangerous, if they're engaging in something like self-harm, we might need to come in and take over or set a really firm limit so that they're able to remain safe. This could be, I'm going to call 911 if I don't believe that you're safe. And that is absolutely an important limit to set if that's something that's going on with your child, right? And so practical support can run the whole gamut from, we don't need to do anything, I'll just sit here and be with you, to, okay, let's collaborate and problem solve together. What would be the pros and cons of this? Do you think it would be more helpful right now to go for a little walk, or do you want to watch a funny TV show? What would help you sort of, decompress from the day? We might teach them skills. We might redirect them to another thought or activity. We might encourage exposure. So if they're avoiding something that feels scary, that might be us saying, okay, let's do it. I know it's hard. I know it's scary for all these reasons. We're going to do it. So lots of different ways that this can look depending on, the age of your child, where they are in the illness, and what the behavior is. The caregiver translation on this is, oh, now I get to help. And so if you're the fixer and you're like, oh, great, okay, this is where I get to jump in on that piece, right? So the first part is the validation and the emotional support. The second part is the practical support. This is the love and the limits, right? And we need both. We need a combination of the two. So we need validation and support around health and safety behaviors, especially with eating disorder recovery, because it can be so dangerous. But the beautiful thing is that as we increase our empathy, we actually can increase our confidence in setting these limits that our child needs to be safe and learn and thrive. And as we set the limits and boundaries, we often have better access to our empathy. If we feel like we're a punching bag for our child or we're getting trampled all the time, we're not going to have a ton of access to compassion and empathy. And so if we need to set limits in order to have better access to our compassion, that is important. They actually have done studies on this, and the most compassionate people, the Mother Teresas, the, Dalai Lamas of the world, have great boundaries, which makes a ton of sense because it's hard to have empathy when you feel like a punching bag, right? So this work is a marriage of these two things. It's the love and the limits together. All right. One final thought, refuel. And I used to talk about this with parents and caregivers as self-care, and I've thrown that term in the garbage because I think we too often think of self-care as being something that is optional, or like, sure, if I have a free day sometime 20 years from now, I'll do that. I want you to start thinking about taking care of yourself as imperative as the whatever you put into your gas tank. You wouldn't try and drive a car on empty. You cannot parent on empty either, especially if you have a child that's struggling with a mental health issue. It's just too hard. So when you take care of yourself, know that you are taking care of your child. Please make this a non-negotiable because it is for your child as much as it is for you. So take a second and ask yourself, what love do I need to give myself, whatever that might look like? And what limits do I need to be setting in my life in order to be better taking care of myself? So think about that too. It's a big question, but maybe, chew it over tonight. And remember that our kids, your child, will do what you do, not what you say, because they watch us, they absorb it. Modeling is so powerful. So if you want your child to be better at taking care of themselves, show them how to do it. If you want your child to be better at setting limits and boundaries, show them how you do it. This can be incredibly valuable. So on behalf of your child, I want to say thank you. Good things take time. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it never will. So they might not say it. They might not fully understand what you're doing for them. I can almost guarantee that they don't fully understand how much you love them, unless maybe they have kids of their own. So I want to thank you on their behalf. Just taking this time on a Thursday night for an hour to sit in front of a computer screen to do this is a testament of your love for your child. So thank you. Until they grow up and, God willing, pick up the phone and call you one day and say, I had no idea what you did for me. Thank you. Let me say it for them. Your work here is a gift to them, whether they have any idea that you're doing this or not. So, okay. And if you're not sick of me yet, and you're interested in more skills and tools and work like this, I've got my website up here. I think Danny said that she'd be shooting that information out. I have a couple of things coming up in May. So I have a half-day parent caregiver workshop that's focused on disordered eating and body image concerns, a 3-hour workshop where we talk through various eating disorder behaviors and symptoms and different ways that parents can intervene kind of along this. And then I also have a weekly parent and caregiver skills group that I do. I keep it really small to 6 sets of caregivers. So I've got 3 spots left. It's starting on Tuesday, and this is the curriculum that we use. As you can tell, I love an alliteration. So we talk through walking through these 5 steps to enable you to reconnect to your values as a parent. And all that information is on my website. And if you do decide to sign up for a workshop or a group, when you get your confirmation email, just email me back and let me know that you were in this talk tonight, and I will make a 10% donation to EDF on your behalf. I also do parent caregiver consultations. You can contact me individually about that. And this is an amazing, amazing resource that I want to put in the hands of all parents and caregivers, but especially if your child struggles with an eating disorder, they have beautiful resources. This is a website, mentalhealthfoundations.ca. It's a Canadian group originally. And so the CA is not a typo. Mental Health Foundations with an S.ca. Again, maybe we can put that in the email. There are hours and hours of resources, videos, books, handouts. This is an incredible group that does amazing work to support parents and caregivers. So all free resources on there. Huge, huge, huge resource to families. And then lastly, thank you to the Eating Disorder Foundation. Danny, thank you so much for having me. When we first started talking about doing this, I was saying to Danny that I would give this talk on a street corner if I thought enough people would show up and listen. And so I'm very, very grateful for them for setting all of this up and making this happen, and for all the amazing work that you guys do. And we're grateful. So lucky to have you. So that's it.
Well, thank you so much. That was so incredible. And we're getting so many comments in the chat of just how validating it is as a parent to hear this, and how grateful they are to be here. So thank you. And I'll be sure to include those websites and things. And if anyone has questions, please email me and we'll get you the answers to everything. So thank you all for being here. We really only have just a few minutes, but we got some really good questions. And one that came up a few times, and I think this is just like a really common thing that parents who have kiddos that are struggling with eating disorders hear is, I hate my body, I don't want to be fat, that kind of language. And if you could give us an example of just what a validation would look like for that example with the 3 becauses would be super helpful.
Yes. So I'll walk you through an example, but I will also tell you that website, the Mental Health Foundation's website, there is a whole PowerPoint and talk where they walk through how do you respond and how might you respond differently if your child is in a larger body, or if maybe your child is underweight and needing to weight restore, and how there might be sort of nuances there. And so please, that'll give you like 20 or 30 minutes on this. But yeah, I think this is one of the trickiest things. And so I always say to parents, I think this is a place where if you have struggled with your own eating disorder, disordered eating, body image, as most of us have, just statistically speaking, when we do studies on this, right? This can be a way that painful experience that you have endured can actually open the door for empathy for what your child is going through. And so I hear often from parents of, I feel so awful that I've struggled with this myself. And I'm like, but you understand, you get this. And it doesn't mean that you respond to your child with like, yes, here, let me tell you how I've struggled with my body image. But I mean that to say that you can connect to those feelings, to the feelings that are underneath the struggles with body image, and that can help you validate that for your child. So this is a place where it would be really important to use the words you feel. So, I hear you saying that you hate your body. You feel like your body is disgusting and awful, right? We're not saying your body is disgusting. We're saying you feel like your body is wrong. You feel like you don't like your body. You feel fat in your body today. And then we can validate some of the reasons why they might be feeling that way. And I know this is a minefield, so I would encourage you to maybe jot some of it down before you try this, or just try one. But we could just start with, something as simple as you're struggling with your eating, and it feels really overwhelming to be in your body all day. If you have a child that's working on weight restoration, we can acknowledge your body is changing. That feels so hard. It feels so uncomfortable. We can also take from a perspective of, we all live in this toxic culture where we can say, you feel like the body that you're in isn't what your body's supposed to look like. You feel like the body that you're in doesn't match the bodies that you see on TV or that you see on Instagram. You feel like you're bigger than all of your friends, right? Again, that you feel like, whatever it is for your particular child. And you might know better than anyone else, maybe they struggle in part because they're taller and that makes them feel different, or they struggle, with a particular part of their body. Maybe their body, like I said, with the weight restoration process is changing. And so clothing feels like it's fitting differently, and that feels really hard. And then we can attach it to the feelings that come up underneath it. So if we think about it as that being sort of the tip of the iceberg often of like the actual body image, then what are the implications of that? So often when we talk about body image, a large component of it is connected to these things that are really important to your child. And so perhaps for your child, it might be something like, and you're worried if your body isn't the way it's quote unquote supposed to be, you're not going to make friends. Or those girls that were picking on you at school are going to start saying things again. Or you're never going to be in a romantic relationship. And that makes you feel really sad, like you're missing out on stuff that your friends have. Or it makes you feel like you're not accomplished, because that's a big part of how you judge yourself, right? Again, we're not saying that these things are accurate. We're just saying that this might be what is underpinning some of those worries for your child. So you're actually using it as an opportunity to validate this, but also help them get to the things that are underneath it. And then I'll tell you, it is scary. It's a minefield. Your kid might bite your head off if you try and do it. And this is one of the hardest parts of struggling with an eating disorder is the body image distress, the pain that comes up around the body. And if you can be someone that can be with that, be with your child in that pain, what a gift. What an incredible gift. So it's a minefield, but I always say, would you leave your kid alone in a minefield? Probably not, right? Even if it might be dangerous for you. And so I always encourage parents, that's a great video on the website that will really walk through this in greater depth for you. But I think it's a beautiful thing that we can do, and we're going to mess up and we're not going to do it perfectly, and they might get mad at us, and all of that is a part of the process. But man, if you can be with your child in their body image distress, and you can be someone that they can talk to about bad body image days, what a gift to their recovery process, because how many people can they actually talk to about that? So long answer, but
thank you so much. And I think you hit it. And I've gotten feedback from parents who are trying this out, and they say, I feel like I'm like speaking a different language, or my kid will say like, you sound so weird. Like, what are you saying? And it just takes practice before it becomes easier. But it might feel really funky in the beginning to do this validation in this way. So do we have time for one more question? I know.
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay. So somebody wrote in saying, my adult daughter lives in another town and barely interacts with me at all, and never interacts in a meaningful way or any significant way. She doesn't actually say it, but I project from her, I don't want to interact with you at all. So how do I encourage or start some kind of interaction where emotion coaching can take place? And I think this touches on, what if my kiddo doesn't live at home? How do I kind of do this from afar, or with my kid who might be a little bit older and we don't have a great relationship? And I know this is kind of a big question, but just hearing a few thoughts on that.
No, absolutely. And it's first of all, what a beautiful question. And I'm sending you so much love. And something I hear so often too. So again, you're not alone in that. I think that first of all, text message, email, voice memo, leaving it on the voicemail, always ways that we can reach out, even if there's maybe a break or sort of an estrangement there. This feels very counterintuitive, but man, have I seen it work wonders. If you start with, I get why you don't want to talk to me, or I understand why we've drifted apart because. And I know that it might just feel like it goes against every part of your body as a parent. Again, remember that you're not agreeing with it. You're just saying, hey, I can see why. And if you can go one step further on that, of even taking, if there's a place that you can authentically take a tiny bit of ownership around it of, I know the way that I handled X, Y, and Z, might have contributed to the fact that we've grown apart. That can really kind of open things up because you're releasing them from some of their own burden and their own shame that this is their fault. But to just start with, I understand why you don't want to talk to me because, and then the emotional support is, I love you and I'm not going anywhere, or I'm never going to give up, or I think about you all the time and I wish I could give you a hug. Whatever it is that's authentic for you that you want to communicate. And then the practical support might be something like, can I ask for your permission to send you a text message once a week, checking in? And we start there, right? Or maybe just saying, I'm going to send a text once a week to tell you I love you, unless you tell me that you don't want me to do that. And we go from there. But there's beautiful ways that the validation can break down some of these obstacles, these barriers that get in the way. And especially with, our EFFT training and what we know about the neurobiological wiring between a parent and a child, I believe in my bones, without knowing the circumstances, that your child wants to have contact with you, just the same way that you want to have contact with your child. It doesn't mean it happens overnight. It doesn't mean it ever actually happens, right? I mean, estrangements happen and those things, are real. But I believe that there is a part of your child that always wants to be connected to you. And so I would encourage, there's huge fear, there's huge shame, there's so much self-blame, all these things get kicked up when you think about reaching out to your child. But man, and I've been on the end of working with an individual in therapy, and they're like, yeah, my mom keeps texting me and she keeps letting me know. And, it might take 6 months, but it's getting communicated, and that love is getting communicated. And so, yes, I'm sending all of my love to you and all of you that are struggling with this. And maybe it starts with a text message, but I would say go for it in terms of, I get why we're not close right now, because. And there's some great resources on the website around this as well, of actually writing out a script like this. And then just say, I'm gonna keep trying, and then keep trying. If you say, I'm gonna text you every week, text every week. Or if you say, I'm gonna shoot you a text once a month, do it. And if you can't commit to something like that because you're like, oh, it's just too painful, I don't know, then you don't have to have any practical support. It can just be, I get why we're not communicating right now because I love you and I'm not going anywhere. And that's it. And just have faith that can have a huge ripple effect, even though I know it feels hard and scary.
Thank you so much for that. I think it was an important note to end on, that parents who don't, or caregivers who don't have their loved ones living in the same house, that this work is really applicable and can be used in so many different ways.
Absolutely.
So, Bryn, thank you so much. These moments where we get to have these conversations and learn how to best support our caregivers so they can support their loved ones, I think are incredibly powerful. And so thank you for your time and your expertise. And we're so grateful to have you. And again, anyone, if you need to get in touch with EDF or with Bryn, you can email us. I can get you in touch with her. Just let us know what you're looking for, and we're happy to help you. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much. It was an honor. I appreciate all of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.